This is lesson 5.8a as an alpha in elementary algebra, and this is an application section, which means that we're going to be doing some story problems. I know you hate these with a passion, but this is the stuff that kind of pulls everything together. So we're just going to start with example 1, talking about number problems, and it says the product. So that means we're going to multiply of two consecutive odd integers. Okay, so remember, if one integer is x and the other one is an odd number, so let's say x is 3, the next odd number would be 5. So how did we get from 3 to 5? We added 2 to the 3. So there's our two consecutive odd integers. And it says that the product of those is 63. So that if we take x times x plus 2, we're going to get 63. Or, if we write it this way, that's our equation. So now if we distribute, we get x squared plus 2x equals 63. Quadratic equation. There's a 2 there. So what do we do with that? Well, remember we set it equal to 0. And then we solve it. First of all, I'm going to look and see if this is possible before I try completing the square or some other method of solving it. Are there two numbers multiplied together that are going to give me 63 and added give me 2? Oh gosh, let's see. 9 times 7 is 63. And if I took the difference between those, so if I made this a plus and this a minus, because I want to get a negative when I multiply, so I have to take one of them has to be a negative and one a positive, so that when I multiply a positive and a negative, I get a negative answer. And when I take positive 9 and negative 7, I get a positive 2. So that works. But that hasn't told me what x is. And that's what I'm looking for here. What are those two numbers? So x minus 7 equals 0, and x plus 9 equals 0. See, it works better to split these up into two different equations here, solve those, and then I'm done. So x equals 7, and x equals negative 9. Okay, so I have a couple different possible answers here. X can be 7, and then if I take 7 plus 2 is 9. So if x is 7, that's my first number. My second number is going to be 9. And let's see what it said. It said, are there two numbers that when I multiply them together, I get 63, and both those numbers are odd? Well, that works for both 7 and 9. Now let's look at the other one. If x is negative 9, then if I take negative 9 plus 2, I get negative 7. So that's my other possibility. Are those both odd numbers? Yep. Are they consecutive? Yep. If I multiply them together, do I get positive 63? Yep. Negative times a negative is a positive. So I have two different options of answers there. Two of those numbers are 7 and 9, and the other choice is negative 7, negative 9. Okay, let's look at example 2. Example 2 says the sum of two numbers is 13. So we have a number here and a number here, and it says it equals 13. Their product is 40. So when I take this number times this number, I get 40. Find the numbers. Okay, so let's look at this first thing here. We've got two numbers added up together give us 13. What are those two numbers? Well, let's say that one of those numbers is 8, and we don't know the other one. So 8 plus what is 13? Well, you're going to look at this and say, oh, 8 plus 5. Well, how did you get 5? How did you get this number right here to be 5? How do you know it's 5? Well, you took the difference between this one, and that gave you that number there. Well, we're going to do the same thing here. So we've got two numbers added together to give us 13. X plus something equals 13. We don't know what either one of those numbers are. But let's see, I know this one is x. What does this one have to be? Well, let's look at this one here. How did we find out what that number was? We took 13 minus 8. So that's what we're going to do here. To find that other number, if one number is x, the other number is going to be 13 minus x. Just like we said, if one of these numbers is 8, this number is going to be 13 minus 8. So there's our two numbers that when we add those together, we're going to get 13. So let's try that. Oops. Let's do something. X plus 13 minus x equals 13. There's my two numbers, there and there. And let's combine them. Well, x minus x is 0, and 13 equals 13. Yep, that works. So when we add those numbers together, do we get 13? Yep. Alright, so there's my two numbers. It says when I add them together, I'm going to get 13. What is it also saying? Their product is 40. So when I multiply them together, I get 40. Okay, so what we did is we used the first equation to come up with our two numbers. Now that we've got our two numbers, x and 13 minus x, we're done with that part. And we're just going to focus on that there. Alright, so this gives me x times 13 is 13x. X times x is x squared. And let's bring everything to one side of the equal sign. Okay, now here's a trick. Let's put it in the right order. We're going to put our x squared first. That always goes first. Okay, now a little trick here. Let's move some stuff out of the way here. Okay, because we're focusing on this right here. Notice I've got a negative x. What can I do with that? It's a pain in the neck to have a negative there. So what I want it to be positive. So one of the tricks is we can change it to positive, but we have to change absolutely every sign in the rest of the equation to its opposite. And then I can change it to a positive. Okay? It's called multiplying both sides by -1. So it's taking this whole thing times -1. And then that changes that to a positive, negative, positive. Okay? But we don't have to really show it. We just have to do it. Okay, so once we're at that point, we look and say, can I factor it into two binomials? Are there two numbers multiplied together that give me 40? Added give me -13. Yes, there are. And again, because this is negative, my largest number is going to be negative. So, is that right? That's the question. If I multiply -8 times 5, do I get -40? No. So that tells me I've got something wrong here. That means this is going to have to be negative because two negatives give me a positive. Two negatives added together give me a bigger negative. So -8 plus -5 is -13. So now it's correct. And then I break it up and say x minus 8 equals 0 and x minus 5 equals 0. So x is going to be 8 and x is going to be 5. Okay, so that is not my answer yet, because remember I had as one of my numbers x, and my other number was 13 minus x. So if my x is 8, then what's 13 minus x? 13 minus 8 is 5. So that's a possibility of my two numbers. Two numbers added together give me 13, and multiplying give me 40. So that works. So let's look at this one. If x is 5, what is 13 minus 5? Or minus x? And that's going to be 8. So there I go again. I get the same number. So 5 and 8. So it works both ways, because when you multiply something, it doesn't matter if it's 8 times 5 or 5 times 8. So it doesn't matter which one's x and which one is 13 minus x, because when you add them, you're going to get 13, because it doesn't matter what order you add. When you multiply, you're going to get 40, because it doesn't matter what order you multiply. So that's example 2. So let's go on to video number 2, and we're going to get into some geometry.